Welcome back, everybody. Unit 4, Language and Power. We're going to look at Reading 1 today. But before we're going to do that, I'd like to look at the focus on the topic. Okay, we've got 3 questions here. Number 1, look at a photograph and how is it possible for people of different nationalities and cultures to communicate with each other? How do we do that? Okay, so we have a common language. And of course, the world language is English, in which we can understand each other. Most people speak English, maybe not all as good, but it is the language with which we can connect. There is also a second world language, which is Spanish and Mandarin coming up. So there are more and more languages coming up that will help us communicate with people from other cultures and other countries. How do language and power relate to each other? What do you think? Language, power. How does that relate? Write it down. And 3, can you tell a person's gender by the way he or she communicates? How do people of both genders use language to gain power? Okay, I'd like you to write down what you think about this, so in our next meeting, we can talk about it. So good. Reading 1, Man, Women, and Language. Of course, we'll look at our vocabulary first. Read the description of a college course in linguistics, the scientific study of language, and the use of language in societies. Pay attention to the bold-faced words. Now, the words that we have here are valued, assertive, myth, profanity, excessive, proverbs, talkative, dominate, sexism, and inferior. Okay, I want you to read this so you will understand the word in context of the sentence and the paragraph. And then I'd like you to match the bold-faced words on the left with the definitions on the right. You can pause your video to do that. Go ahead. That brings us to previewing. Before we're going to listen to an audio, we want to preview to predict the type of the audio, the purpose of the audio, and that will create a focus. So it will help us to know what to listen for. And then when we take notes while we're listening, it is easier to follow. We also then know better how to take notes. You're going to read a student's essay about man, women, and language. Now read the first paragraph, then complete these sentences with man, women, based on how you think the writer will answer the questions he asks in the first paragraph. First paragraph, so only this part. Man, women, and language. Imagine a playground in the United States. A boy, Ashton, and a girl, Laney, are playing with other children. Will their games be the same? What about the ways they will talk to each other? Will their use of language be the same? It's impossible to answer these questions without thinking about gender, the differences that we can see in the behavior of males and females. This behavior includes language use, the way that males and females use their words to communicate with others and to express themselves. As we examine the development of ideas on language and gender, it is important to consider how differences in male and female language show differences in power. Okay, now it is your turn to complete these sentences. Go ahead. Okay, that brings us to the complete audio. We're going to listen to that right now. And while you're listening, please take notes. If you have your book with you, then you can also underline and annotate the text.
Men, women, and language. Imagine a playground in the United States. A boy, Ashton, and a girl, Lainey, are playing with other children. Will their games be the same? What about the ways they talk to each other? Will their use of language be the same? It's impossible to answer these questions without thinking about gender, the differences that we can see in the behavior of males and females. This behavior includes language use, the way that males and females use their words to communicate with others and to express themselves. As we examine the development of ideas on language and gender, it is important to consider how differences in male and female language show differences in power. Late 20th century research, Lakoff and Tannen. In the late 20th century, two scholars, Robin Lakoff and Deborah Tannen, developed important ideas on language and gender. Robin Lakoff described female speech in her book Language and Woman's Place. According to Lakoff, females are less assertive in their speech, avoiding jokes and profanity. Lakoff wrote her book in the 1970s, a time when scholars were examining the position of women in society. They were exploring the idea of sexism, the unfair treatment of women based on a view of them as inferior. During the next 2 decades, Deborah Tannen wrote popular books such as You Just Don't Understand, that made the public aware of important differences between male and female communication. Like Lakoff, Tannen agreed that women speak more politely and less directly than men. For instance, instead of ordering someone directly to open a door, a woman will often use a polite question, such as, "Could you please open the door?" Tannen identified female speech as rapport talk, which can be described as follows: the use of language to build relationships with others, showing agreement with each other, discussion of weakness and fear. In contrast, Tannen described male speech as report talk, with the following characteristics: the use of language to show your knowledge, avoiding personal topics, discussion of sports or politics. A well-known example used by Tannen to show differences in communication styles is that of a husband and wife who are lost and need directions. The wife will usually want to ask someone for directions, which involves admitting weakness and depending on someone's help. The husband, on the other hand, will usually prefer to use a map or GPS and solve the problem by himself. Both Lakoff and Tannen did important work to help us understand how men and women use language differently in the English-speaking world. Early 21st century research, pool and camera. Now, in the 21st century, scholars continue to explore important ideas on language and gender. Jennifer Poole, author of Women, Men, and Language, has looked closely at women's speech and divided it into categories, including these: house talk, speech that is focused on sharing information related to women's traditional role of housekeeping; scandal, speech that is focused on criticizing other people's behavior and discussing whether it is right or wrong; chatting, the sharing of personal information in a way that allows women to support and care for each other; griping, complaining to each other about their lives as women and their lack of freedom and independence. Like Tannen did earlier, Poole has focused on female speech as a way of building relationships with other people. For instance, as women chat about their lives, they share common feelings and help each other emotionally. The scandal talk described by Poole is similar to Tannen's description of female gossip, discussion of other people's secrets. Sharing gossip allows a girl or woman to prove that she is close enough to others to know private details about them. Another scholar, Deborah Cameron, examines the differences in male and female language and questions where these differences come from. In contrast to the idea that speech differences are a natural part of gender, Cameron believes that they are based on the fact that men have more power than women in society. In her book, What Language Barrier?, she disagrees with the idea that women talk more than men, and asserts that men often dominate conversations. She views the idea that women talk more than men do as a negative opinion that women talk too much. This opinion is based on the sexist idea that women are less important than men. The traditional view and how it is changing. This brings us back to considering the place of women in society. For centuries, people around the world have said that women are too talkative. We can see this idea in several proverbs, including these. A woman's tongue is her weapon, and she does not let it rust. Chinese. It's an unhappy house where the hen is louder than the rooster. French. A woman's hair is long, but her tongue is even longer. Russian. These proverbs show us the myth of the talkative woman, which is based on an unfair view of their inferiority. This view still exists in many societies, even though the position of women has greatly improved in the last century. When a person has social, political, and economic power, their speech is valued, not seen as excessive. As women gain power through education and employment, they may speak more directly and less politely, making more jokes instead of saying, "Excuse me," and "I'm sorry." With more power in society, women might speak more like men. Likewise, as men share more power, they might speak more politely and dominate fewer conversations. As we look at ideas on language and gender, we see that speech is more than communication. It is an expression of power in many societies.
Okay, very good. It brings us to the main ideas and the main points. Okay, look at the preview on page 77. How did your answers help you understand the essay, the talk? Remember, when we preview, we predict the type and the purpose, and therefore create a focus on what to listen for. Let's see how much you got. These are the main points, number 1 until 8. Write the T for true and the F for false for each statement, and rewrite the false statements to make them true. So, for example, number 1 is false. Ideas on language and gender have basically stayed the same over the last 100 years. That's false. They have changed. Okay, you can pause your video to answer number 2 until 8. That brings us to the part of details. Those are the development of the main point. Circle the best answer for each question and write the number of the paragraph where you found the answer. So by answering the questions, you're looking for details. You have to scan the text in order to find in what paragraph you found the answer. So for previewing, what we did just now, we do that for listening, but we also do that for reading. So when we're listening, we preview in order to get the purpose and the genre and the purpose to know what to listen for. But in reading, we do the same thing to still get the genre of the text, the purpose, and the focus to know what to read for. Very good. And we preview by looking at the title, the headings, and visuals. And from there, we would know. After we've done that, we would skim the text by reading the introductory paragraph, every topic sentence, and the last paragraph. And we do that in order to know the main idea of the text. So then we do the question analysis to know the topic and the purpose of the question. And then we can scan the text, just looking over the text to find the keyword that will help us find the answer for the question. Now, that is exactly what you're going to do now. You're going to scan the text to find the answer to the question, the detail. So you have to annotate every question on the keywords, and then where you found the answer, that paragraph number, you write on the line. Great. You can answer numbers 2 until 8. 1 has been done for you. What does sexism against women mean? It means treating them unfairly, and that is found in paragraph 2. Go ahead. You can do the rest. Yeah, so just now I was emphasizing on listening, and I hadn't emphasized on reading yet. So I have done that just now. That's the previewing section, is for both listening and reading. The only thing though is with reading, we can skim the text, we scan the text, and we annotate the text to find the keywords, right? That is something we cannot do with the listening. So with the listening, you would take notes, right? So good. Now we are at making inferences, inferring the meaning of proverbs. Proverbs, those are sayings that have an implied underlying meaning, and we cannot translate them literally. So an inference is an educated guess about something that is not directly stated in the text. Now, writers sometimes use proverbs as an interesting way of suggesting an idea without directly stating it. To understand a proverb, readers need to go beyond the exact meaning, yeah? And look for possible meanings. Now, we do that a lot when we do literature, right? Okay, a woman's tongue is her weapon and she does not let it rust. Which obviously means, see, women argue constantly until they win. They will not stop. So we know that tongue can mean the words or the language, right? A weapon is used for fighting. Fighting with words is arguing, and people who argue have a chance to get what they want. If a weapon is used constantly, it will not rust or get damaged and become useless. The conclusion: to get what they want, women talk and argue a lot. So after thinking carefully about the possible meaning of important words in the proverb, we have a better idea of what the whole proverb means. So we can infer the meaning. That's why it's important to look at every keyword. Okay, we're gonna read each proverb, and I want you to carefully think about what important words in the proverb mean. Circle the best meaning of each proverb. So we have number 1, it's an unhappy house where the hen is louder than the rooster. And number 2, a woman's hair is long, but her tongue is even longer. Now try to understand the important keywords in the proverbs, and then try to understand which one is the correct meaning, A, B, or C. You can pause your video. Very good. That brings us to expression of opinions. Remember, we would use peel or RL. Peel, point, explanation, evidence, and linking back to the beginning, or RL, assertion, reasoning, evidence, and linking back. Okay, we have 3 questions here. I want you to write down what you think about these 3 points, and we can then discuss it when we meet each other. Number 1, give an example of sexism in your home culture. It can be an example from school, work, business, or family. Number 2, do you agree that men and women use language differently? If so, what do you think are the most noticeable differences between male and female use of language? And 3, what is another myth that people believe about men and women? Can you think of any proverbs related to this myth? Okay, guys, write it down. So once we meet each other during a lesson, we can talk about this. We can share the opinions and using the structured way of expressing opinion through peel or RL. Okay, we started reading one off by doing the vocabulary and looking at the context of a text to understand what the words mean. Then we connected the words with the definitions. We looked at previewing, so meaning that we look at the title, the headings, and the visuals of a text in order to get the genre of the text and the purpose, which gives us the focus on what to read for. And then we skim, we read the introductory paragraph, every first sentence of every body paragraph, and the concluding paragraph in order to get the main idea. Then we do, if there are questions, we do the question analysis to get the topic and the purpose of the question. We annotate for the keywords. Also, when we skim the text, we annotate for the keywords and also the questions. And then we scan the text just by looking over the text to find the keyword and the answer to the questions. We then read the text while also listening to the audio. We answered true and false questions. Those were based on the main points that are in the text. And we answered detailed questions and practicing scanning the text and writing down the paragraphs where we found the information, the answer. We talked about inferring the meaning of proverbs that have an implied meaning. And we try to figure out what true proverbs mean by looking at the keywords in the proverb and then generally coming up with the meaning of the proverb. And lastly, we expressed opinion by using Peel or ARL. Amazing. So good. I will see you again very soon. Take care. God bless you. Bye-bye.